Hello, everybody. We are online. Welcome to the 30th Symposium of Pharmaceutical Connection, KBD and Continuous Manufacturing. This is the panel section. So before I start, I would like to ask permission to the speakers, Kendal and Sander, who are already in the backstage, to make a welcome in Portuguese to our Brazilian delegates and make them more comfortable to interact through the chat. So I will start here. Olá, pessoal, bom dia, sejam bem-vindos. Nós estamos iniciando agora a nossa mesa redonda. É um grande prazer estar aqui. Nós temos já os palestrantes no estúdio, né? Vocês ainda não podem vê-los, logo eu já chamarei eles. Eu vou fazer uma breve apresentação. Nós temos 651 participantes no congresso, nesse simpósio, desculpa, a maioria são de pessoas já graduadas, mas temos também bastante estudantes de graduação, sejam todos bem-vindos. 84,7%, 84,7% são da área de farmácia, mas temos também químicos e engenheiros aí presentes, e mais de 40% são profissionais que estão atuando na indústria. A gente está bastante feliz com esse resultado aí, esperamos que vocês gostem do evento. E para começar essa mesa redonda, eu vou convidar a professora Walkiria. A professora Walkiria. Olá, Walkiria.
Olá, olá.
Sorry. A professora Walkiria é uma grande amiga com quem eu pude colaborar e conviver, mesmo que distante, por esses anos, desde 2015, quando eu tive o prazer de conhecê-la. Ela será a mediadora dessa mesa redonda, ela é brasileira, então não estranhe por eu estar falando em português com ela está me entendendo perfeitamente. Ela vai falar inglês, porque temos os nossos palestrantes, né? E então ela vai iniciar aí a apresentação da mesa redonda, logo depois convidaremos os speakers, né, nossos palestrantes. Walkiria, seja muito bem-vinda, obrigada por estar comigo aí nessa jornada e nessa empreitada de organizar esse evento. Foi um grande prazer, tem sido um grande prazer colaborar com você. Deixa eu incluir novamente a apresentação aqui.
Ok.
So, 1 minute, please.
Ok. Bom dia a todos. Espero que todos estão me escutando bem. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for the people that are based in the UK. I'm Walkiria Schlindwein, professor in pharmaceutics at the Montfort University in Leicester, and I would like to welcome everybody to our roundtable discussion of the third Simpósio Conexão Farmacêutica, Universidade e Indústria, com foco da discussão para hoje é Quality by Design and Continuous Manufacture. Before we start, I would like to do really a big thank you to Kendal Pitt, Senior Technical Director at GSK, Sander van der Baan, Technical Development Manager at Almac, Suelen Navarro, Senior Inspector at ANVISA, and also she represents ANVISA in the expert working group responsible for the ICH Q13 guideline. All of you, thank you for your time and for contributing to the discussion. The format will be each member of the panel will have 10 minutes to present their views and experience on QBD and continuous manufacture, and we will then move into the Q&A session at the end. So please ask questions using the chat, and the session will finish at 3 p.m. UK time and 12 a.m. Brazil time. If there's no time to answer your particular question, we will be in touch with you offline at a later stage. So enjoy the session, and without further ado, allow me to introduce the first speaker, Kendal Pitt. Kendal, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Kendal, please, you can share your screen.
Yep. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Walkiria and Bianca, for inviting me. As you can see, my daytime job is I work in manufacturing at GSK, both mainly on new product introduction, and I'm based in the UK. And one of my hobbies is that I am a visiting professor at the Montfort University, and I give lectures and talk to students and talk to people to give the benefit of my experience. One of the advantages of this is this session is that Bianca has arranged people like myself who've got a lot of experience of life of manufacturing to share with you. So the aim of my talk is to give you some idea of what we get up to, but more importantly, to make you think, what would I do under these circumstances? So in my example, I'm going to give you an example of active pharmaceutical ingredient, continuous manufacturing, and then ask, what would you do at this stage? So moving on, this is a plant. This is a chemical plant. As you can see, it's quite big. To give you an idea, the little dots down the bottom here, these are cars. And then you've got these very large production buildings, which are manufacturing active pharmaceutical ingredient. So the example I'm going to quote took place in one of these buildings. It was actually in this big building in the center, and I'll tell you how big it is to give an example. And we were working in one small room to give you some idea of what you could do with continuous manufacture and with active products. So the example I'm going to quote is of a reaction which was been made continuous on that. Now, it's a primary exothermic, it's a reaction. What this means, it was actually a Suzuki reaction, which means essentially, if it goes out of control, you get an explosion. So for obvious reasons, you're going to want to try and reduce this risk of explosion. So if you look at how this is handled for a batch process, the standard process used is 2,500 litre vessel. To give you some idea of how big that is, it's 91 stairs you have to get from the bottom of the reactor to the top. So you certainly get very fit doing these process demonstrations because you're forever running up and down these steps. So that gives you some idea of how big this reactor is. Because you don't want it to explode, it's minus 50 degrees C is what you're running it at. And it's going to cost you £3 million to keep it cold. That is all the piping, all the antifreeze, all the materials which you need to keep it cool. So clearly, batch is expensive and big. So people came up with a continuous flow chemistry approach. In this case, you've only got 4 litres in the pipes of the flow reactor at any time. And the actual flow reactor itself is the size of a vending machine. I can't show you pictures of it because that's secret, but I'll give you a idea. It's just like a coffee cups vending machine. You just have one of those and it's got 4 litres of pipes in it at any time. Because you've got lower amounts of material in it, you only need to keep it down to minus 20 degrees C because there's a lot less risk and you can cool it down. You can guarantee everything is very, very cold. And it's only going to cost you £700,000. I say only £700,000. It's a bit expensive for a vending machine, but considering the costs of what it would be for a batch, you can see it's looking quite reasonable. And of that machine, about 70,000 of it is what you're going to have to use for this product each time. The rest of it is you can actually keep reusing for different products. So you can see that there's some distinctive advantages of that. So when you look at continuous, you need to look at what's taking place. What other things you need to look at? Well, what I like about continuous and flow chemistry, it follows first models principles. It follows maths and physics. You can actually look at it, number scale directly on that. So the first thing which came out of this analysis is you've got 4 litres in your pipes at any time, but it's going to take you 36 hours then to run your batch. So what you've gained in small materials, it's going to take you a lot longer to actually run the reaction. Normally the reaction runs in about 1 hour to 2 hours. So you're going to have the plant in use for quite a lot longer. The other thing you have to think about when you do these sums and think about it is the bit which is being looked at, which is one of the reaction. It was one of the intermediate steps in this case. You're looking to get 95% purity. That's what there's an inline process analytical technology. There's an NIR at the end, which is looking for assay to show that it's 95% pure. You've got 20 seconds is how long your material takes to flow through the pipes. So it takes you 3 seconds to get your data. So this gives you some idea of how much you're looking at and the timings for that. The only problem was there was no real feedback on this system. If it actually detected the fact that it was going impure, you couldn't feed back into the system directly at this stage. You just had to dispose of the material, put it to waste. So something to think about is when I have my continuous process, when I have my process analytical technology, am I getting the full advantage of real-time release by having some way of controlling it within the system? So you're not really getting the full advantage of continuous unless you, in this particular example of it. So think through your analysis. What am I trying to get out of it? What are the advantages? As anything else, it's a balancing act to get to the right area. Now, something to ponder is, what would you rather have? And we can bring this out and discuss. Would you like a nice large factory like that? Or would you like a small vending machine? Now, this obviously is not the machine we used, but this is an example. This is my little picture in your mind. Do you want a vending machine's worth running there, which could run for long periods of time? Or do you want a large factory around it? So it's just something to think about what you're doing in continuous. Now, this is a very busy slide, and I wasn't going to particularly go through it, but just to point out that there are clearly some advantages of going continuous, and the references at the bottom, and you can get that off Google. So obviously it's small. You can see some of the graphic pictures when you look at a big site versus a vending machine. Obviously it's a lot smaller footprint. You can put PAT on it more readily. It's more easier to handle within that. The other thing to bear in mind, obviously, scale up is actually quite simple for continuous, because all you need to get to is just 4 litres of solution in your first run just to see how it behaves. You don't have to try and assemble 2,500 litres or something to try and test it out all the way through. So clearly, it's less waste and less labour is required of that. So there's clear advantages. There's also some disadvantages around the fact that specialist equipment, there's very few sites in the world actually can do continuous processing, for example. So if you want to move it somewhere else, if you want to go into a contract manufacturing organization, you're going to be struggling to find anybody who's got this equipment. You then, it requires quite skilled people within that. And then you've got to sort of think your way through the regulatory discussion with the authorities. But on the whole, they are quite receptive to this sort of continuous process. Certainly, it's in the public domain that GSK has 2 products which are made continuously by API processes, which have been registered and accepted somewhere in the world. Sadly, the product I described went to heaven. It failed in phase 2, but that's life. So that hopefully gives you your support. Something else just to bring back to you from the industry perspective is, why are you doing this? Well, we're doing it primarily for the benefit of the patient. Always bear in mind there's a patient who requires your supplies. If you can develop it more quickly, you're going to treat more people more quickly. If you can make it at lower cost, more people will be able to benefit. So bear in mind you're doing this for the patient, not just for the science as well. So we're in an electronic age. These slides are available afterwards. You can see that you can access quite a lot of information about continuous and about drug discovery generally. These are the key books which I tend to use. In fact, Alton's Pharmaceutics is one I carry around on my iPhone. And you'll also recognize that some of the presenters and some of the look rather familiar, because they're actually, some people are actually written within this book, these books as well, these electronic books. So I'll stop there and say thank you for your attention. I'll hand over now, and I look forward to the comments and suggestions at the end. So thank you.
Thank you, Kendal. Thank you for a good short presentation and overview. Definitely, there's a lot of things to ponder about there and to think about, particularly for situations like Brazil as we move into the future. Yeah. So let's see the questions afterwards. So I would like to introduce the second speaker, Sander. He will briefly also give you an overview of his experience, and Sander, is down to you.
Okay. Thank you again to Bianca and Walkiria for inviting me here. I currently am the technical development manager for Almac, but in a previous life, I used to work for GlaxoSmithKline and had a long association with continuous manufacture all the way from R&D to production, and it's that part of my work and life I'll be using for this presentation. Next slide. I do unfortunately need to briefly state that again, any opinion or otherwise that I do here is my view only and not that where I work. Next. So what I try to display here is a continuous granulation facility. So basically high shear twin screw granulation followed by fluid bed drying, milling, and then tablet manufacture. The picture you see on the left was taken in 2005 when Glaxo worked in partnership with GEA to develop the actual continuous granulator, and I spent a good 3 or 4 months what felt like a little cellar or basement working on a continuous granulator, and I think you can just about make out all the components that made up the granulator, the vacuum transfer and the fluid bed dryer, and a little mill in the background. That then got translated, I think 7 years later, into the actual commercial available design, which you can see on the right hand side. So I used to be the production manager, amongst others, for this continuous granulation plant. So I guess just to see it, you actually got a neat split floor where the top floor is that for material management and actually where the mill resides. And at the bottom, you can just about make out the continuous granulator and fluid bed dryer stacked on top of each other on the right hand side, the press. Now what is quite insightful is that the room in which this granulator is built used to house the granulator, just the granulation suite that we use to produce the same amount that this machine was intended to replace. So on top of the granulation suite that you needed for this continuous granulation plant, you would have needed a further blending suite and a further compression suite. So in terms of footprint, it's clearly much reduced. In fact, because I've had such a long association, the machine is actually designed to replace, crudely speaking, 300 kilogram batch sizes in the equivalent production time. So the obvious answer is because it is going through in one go, you tend to actually truly produce that rate. And in our case, that was 25 kilos an hour. Having been the production manager for both batch and continuous, it gives you quite a good insight in the differences between the two streams. So for example, on my continuous plant, if it was going, I would truly get 25 kilos an hour, where there is on the batch side of what I managed, you would often have long hold-ups between steps where paperwork would be approved or material would need to be moved, and actually it led to quite long delays relative to this unit. Next slide. Now, not all facilities look the same, so I'm obviously familiar with some more, and I'll get to that in my last slide why that would be the case. So on the left-hand side, you see something that's available in the public domain. That is the Pfizer continuous plant in Germany. And again, I'll talk some more about that second floor with material transfer. And They've also made their way into universities. I know there is one at the University of Graz in Austria, and here there is one that is in the right-hand side picture. That's at Sheffield University in the UK. So again, you'll see that the designs are all little subtly different, and it's something, I guess, if you go into deep technical process design, you ought to be familiar of. Now, next slide. Rather than, I guess, go into detail, I thought I'd probably share some perspective of a production manager. So why it's undisputable that the consistency of quality that we produce with a continuous manufacturing process, and in fact, the product I managed has been approved in Japan and hopefully soon in the US and Europe. The product quality is extremely repeatable, very controlled, and clearly the control strategy is working very, very well. What you practically end up with, and I think, you know, once you have that commercial manufacturing process, you start managing the economics or the financial side of it. Some of the challenges that you start getting depending on how your machine is designed is you need to keep this continuous process fed with powder. And unfortunately, in my case, that was still with a traditional bin blend process, fixed lot, and actually it is very challenging to supply it with the right amount of powder at the right time that you're consuming it. Similarly, because actually there seems to be a trend towards products that require smaller and smaller batch sizes, and you actually need to match this with a supply chain to manage the shelf life of the product. You need to become extremely good at changing over, because we can't simply manufacture all the demand by the 3rd of January in the new year. It needs to be equally spaced throughout the year. And for a lot of products, we simply do not have the volume, you know, to manufacture day in, day out. So as a consequence, unfortunately, you're back to at some point making a batch, and you need to become very good at changing that machine over. In my case, that machine had about, by us estimating, about 1,500 individual parts, which is obviously the benefit of having it all in one room, that all needed cleaning, inspecting, some swabbing before you could do it again. And again, so it requires a huge logistical effort of coordinating it with operators. What we practically found out that the operators can no longer be those that are associated with more simple pharmaceutical processes. The most suitable actually were the compression operators that are used to multitasking, but we needed to start recruiting differently because some unfortunately ran a mile after a week of being on the continuous process. So again, it demands us skilling up at the exact same time. I think the last one that we should not underestimate is a lot of formulations actually have a blend of requirements, some driven by product and some actually by the manufacturing equipment. And the ultimate formulation that we deliver is probably a blend of both. And I think in my case, the product had probably more been designed for more traditional equipment and retrofitted onto a continuous granulator. So one thing you might want to start thinking about as well is actually in that formulation design, have a new consideration for, you know, what part of the formulation is dictated by process, and really tailor that towards the continuous process rather than use some rules of thumb or traditional knowledge for traditional equipment. That's probably, so it's probably more considerations, more to stimulate thoughts and almost demonstrate to you what you might hopefully be worrying at when you commit to commercial manufacture. Thank you. Look forward to questions after the third speaker. So I'll hand back to you, Walkiria.
Okay, thank you, Sander. Definitely lots there for us to think about, and particularly what you said just at the end, the hybrid approach may be something interesting to blend. I mean, you don't have to do the full singing and dancing, but there is a lot of opportunities for developing paths that are continued, that's more efficiently. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion as well. So now moving on to, thank you, Sander, and moving on to the third speaker, the last speaker, Navarro, Suelen Navarro. It's a pleasure to have you here. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Walkiria. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope you can see my screen. First of all, thank you, Walkiria and Bianca, for this invitation. It's a pleasure for me to participate in discussions regarding continuous manufacturing. So a little bit about myself. I'm a health regulatory expert of ANVISA, and I used to be a CMC reviewer, and nowadays I am GMP inspector at ANVISA. So today I'm here to briefly talk about some ANVISA considerations regarding continuous manufacturing. And to start off with, I need to bring some concept related to continuous manufacturing, because this concept can change according to the area. So when it comes to pharmaceutical field, we consider continuous manufacturing a system where the input material is continuously fed into the system. This material is continuously transformed within the system, and the output material is continuously removed from the system. And this concept must apply to 2 or more unit operations integrated in this system. So continuous manufacturing is an emerging technology, and as Kendal told us, there is several advantages to the company, patient, to the product and the process. And because of this, regulatory agencies around the world support the continuous manufacturing implementation. However, we are aware that there are some hindrances. And one of these hindrances apparently is related to regulatory uncertainties. And we are working to reduce these uncertainties. And hopefully, I would like you to reduce these regulatory uncertainties by the end of this roundtable. So let's talk a little bit about ANVISA regulation regarding continuous manufacturing. So first we have here the timeline, and you can see that around the world, the first market authorization related to continuous manufacturing was approved in 2015 by FDA and EMA. And next to this event, we have the first change approval from batch manufacturing to continuous manufacturing. And then the companies responsible for these products asked for ANVISA permission in 2017 and 2018. Then in 2018, ANVISA gave the first market authorization and as well the second one, and the first change approval from batch manufacturing to continuous manufacturing. So you can see that it's quite recent when we compare to the pharmaceutical history, which means that we are still in progress when it comes to continuous manufacturing. So here in this timeline, you can see that also in 2018, the ICH started the Q13 EWG work. So EWG means Expert Working Group, okay? ANVISA is a member of ICH, and since 2018, I have been the representative of ANVISA in the Q13 EWG. So in 2018, this EWG started the development of this guideline. And this guideline, the Q13 guideline, is specific for continuous manufacturing. So we worked in this development, and the guideline was finished and released in 2021. Obviously a draft version, and this draft version is open for regional consultation. So here you can see the Q13 guideline. You can access the guideline in this website, the ICH website. So the scope of the Q13 guideline is chemical entities and proteins, and we expected that this guideline can be used for other large molecules too. So the guideline can be used for new drug substance and drug products, as well can be used for the conversion from batch manufacturing to continuous manufacturing of drug substance and drug products. In the guideline, you can find scientific principles applicable for continuous manufacturing, regulatory expectations for continuous manufacturing, and some examples and discussions related to drug substances, drug products, the integration between drug substance and drug product manufacturing, and disturbances. As I told you, the regional consultation is open for Q13. Here in Brazil, you can have access to the regional consultation using this link that I provide here for you. In this link, if you open the page, this is the page that you will see. And here is the link. So in this link, you have access to the contribution form. And you all are welcomed to send to us your contributions. All contributions will be considered and evaluated. But please pay attention that the deadline for your contributions is December 7th here in Brazil, okay? So ANVISA is a member of ICH, so we will incorporate the Q13 guideline. However, when it comes to regulation laws, we do not have specific regulations for continuous manufacturing. On the other hand, the existing regulations and guidances do not prohibit continuous manufacture. So we understand that our existing regulations and guidances can be used for continuous manufacturing development and implementation. Besides, ANVISA supports the implementation of continuous manufacturing. And in this case, we truly recommend that industries discuss with ANVISA before implementation and before application in order to get some orientation, in order to share information, okay? Well, as you see, ANVISA is a member of SCH, so we will incorporate the Q13 guideline. And besides, ANVISA has been promoting the spread of continuous manufacturing knowledge among ANVISA experts, because it's for us it's a new technology, and we need to improve this kind of knowledge among our experts. ANVISA also has presented a continuous manufacturing course for industries in 2020, and ANVISA has, during the last years, ANVISA has improved its regulations and guidelines. So nowadays, the regulations and guidelines are more flexible. They use the risk-based assessment, the science-based assessment, the scientific and technical-based approach, which make them more flexible, and this way we can embrace the continuous manufacturing. And lastly, in order to show you how ANVISA supports continuous manufacturing and emerging technology, nowadays we have a policy to be open for discussion, so industries can request meetings with ANVISA in order to discuss this emerging technology prior the application, in order to exchange knowledge, to discuss, to have orientations. So the existing regulatory framework is applicable. It can be used for continuous manufacturing, although we do not have a specific regulation for continuous manufacturing. So here we have some examples of regulation, of ANVISA regulation that can be used for continuous manufacturing. Besides, as I told you, our regulation became flexible so we can embrace the particularities and the issues that are specific or more related with continuous manufacturing. These are some of these. Here we have some of these particularities and needs for continuous manufacturing. And in conclusion, I'd like to reinforce that emerging technologies are quite welcomed by ANVISA. We recommend prior discussions with agents. And in order to address this discussion, the industry should be transparent and the industry should be willing to share with ANVISA. And lastly, there are no regulatory barriers to implementing continuous manufacturing. So this is what I have for today. Thank you. Here you have our contact, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suelen, and it's kind of music to my ears to listen to you saying that there is no barriers to implement all these new tools and technologies, which is very welcome. And I think ANVISA has got in the last 10 years, so that I've been watching you guys, you have a much more proactive a way to move forward and then trying to encourage industry to work with yourself. So thank you very much for your presentation. And we are open now for the discussions, and Bianca is going to watch the chat, but until we'll have some of the questions coming in, maybe I should start with a few questions, and I think I have a question for each of the panelists, and it's a broad question. I know we can talk about those topics perhaps all afternoon or months to go, but looking to the future, and I think I want to address the first one to Kendal. It doesn't have to be only Brazil, but India, China, all these big territories that are manufacturing medicines across the world. What do you think the challenges are in the skill areas, the skill gaps? What do you think the skill gaps are to really make the implementation of quality by design and technologies like continuous manufacture something that is viable in the next 10 years for places like Brazil, for example?
Yeah, thank you. The skill gap is very much around having people who are happy with digital and with mathematics and move from the almost traditional mindset, I say, of formulators. And there are still some around who, for example, on granulation, if we talk about wet granulation, put their hand into the bowl to feel what it feels like, you see. We can't automate that. We can't put it into a file. So it's moving towards the concept of putting to numbers, people understanding what it is. So you need to move people who are away from just looking and feeling to who are very happy with mathematics, with flow puts. You can see some of the numbers Sander put in, some of the numbers I put in about, does it make sense, both from that? What I say about quality by design is, and I use a quote from AstraZeneca, which is, it's good science and it's common sense, and that's the bit which people need to move forward on as well. It's when you look at continuous or anything, when you're trying to apply quality by design, are you doing good science, and is it using common sense? Does it make sense that and if you've got a problem, like you've got 1,500 parts to clean, what are you going to do to get around it? Just to think about it. But that's my thoughts. It's on that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kendal. Yes, very much so. And, as an academic, I see how valuable those things are. And I think at the top of the pile is if the science is not good, it doesn't matter which tool you use or which technology you use. So very much so, this is the case.
We have some questions here. Would you like to ask your question, or I can share?
No, let's move on, and let's move on to the questions from the delegates.
Anderson Flores asked for Suelen Navarro. Are you reading?
Yes. I'm not so sure if this is
it's continuous manufacturing course.
He's asking if there will be a course on continuous manufacturing from ANVISA. Are you thinking about organizing courses within this topic?
Yeah, okay. So ANVISA has presented a course in 2020. We have a quite success with the numbers of attendees. Nowadays, we weren't requested to do the course again or to do another version of this course, but it's something that we can think through. Obviously, if there is this demand, we can address and we can do the course again or another version of this course.
Okay, well,
it would be perfect to have another course.
Yeah, if it was so successful, why not having a second version or third or fourth?
Sorry. I think the same person. Sorry for interrupting you. No, okay. I think the same person asked how to do the application for this course. Yeah. When ANVISA planned a course, we presented in our webpage, and also we sent by email for associations in Brazil. So it's using these two ways, by website and by associations, that we can do the application for this course. But it's open for everyone who wants to participate in. It's public. Okay, thank you.
We have now a question from Alessandra Viçosa from Fiocruz about 3D print. I think it's for Suelen Navarro too. Walkiria, would you like to?
Yes, Suelen. What is the position of ANVISA's position towards the 3D manufacturing in terms of the regulatory issues that are associated with that? So it's more towards personalized medicines and going to this kind of area, because that's where the potential for 3D, I believe, is. So what's the position of ANVISA with respect to 3D?
Okay, so I have to say that before 2019, we have some barriers, but nowadays, actually in 2019, we have a milestone. We changed our laws in order to be more flexible, to embrace risk-based and science-based assessment and approaches. So nowadays our regulation and guidelines are flexible, so we can embrace emerging technology, including 3D printing. We do not have some market authorization yet, but not because we deny, we do not have the request yet for pharmaceutics, but we have a 3D product for medical device. So our regulation, we hope our regulation cannot see as barrier, and if there is some barrier, we can talk, we can discuss, and the industry can justify, it's possible to justify why you are not complying with some specific requisites in our regulation. We can accept that. But for this, you must discuss with us previously to have orientation. But it's possible, yes, it's possible 3D printing as well. It's possible module for the train of production models, not a fixed. So I cannot say everything is possible, but the emerging technology are welcome, and we are open to discuss and approve these new technologies.
Yeah, if I can just ask Kendal and Sandra, both of you have extensive experience also dealing with regulators, and this dialogue is so important. So can you add into that, and if you have anything to add, I think will be very useful to share with us.
Yeah, on specifically about 3D printing, where it's going in the UK in the first instance is within hospital setting, because you can see the niche, the gap there is in pediatrics, in small children who need precise dosing. So that is where it's being trialed at the moment. And we've also initiated some trials in phase 1, where if you're doing ascending dose trials, you can imagine that you could get it printed at the point of manufacture within that, and then rapid analysis on that. Moving forward on 3D, the issue is one of testing the product, which we haven't quite resolved. But people are telling me that with iPhone technology, you're getting close to the point of being able to do something with your camera, adjust it into the UV range, and start seeing assays like that. So absolutely, if we can get the technology to work, we'll use it. And it's a question of, the key question always is, how would it be better than something we have at the moment? And it's small volumes, pediatrics, at the point of use are unstable products. But I'll hand over to Sander to say what his experience is of innovative technology.
I think probably mine just more indirect, I think, in specific to 3D technology. I think obviously, I think the landscape's changed quite dramatically. I showed a picture in 2005, I think, and we'd long been talking about continuous manufacture beforehand. And as a chemical engineer, in fact, it's really awkward to step into an industry that's doing batch. In fact, it doesn't show up on my curricula. And in fact, I didn't even know batch processes existed by the time I went into industry. So I think the journey's probably been very long, because I think that the data I gave you was 2005, where we started developing a machine, because actually we found out the equipment didn't physically exist. It certainly existed for food. So you can get potato chips, I guess they're called in, or would be the translation. You can certainly get that, but there's no good example. So we've had to do that. I think the machine got bought in 2012. The product got finally approved, a first product, in 2020. So you're talking 15 years. So I think actually some of the mechanisms that have been opened up is that some of the regulatory agencies are far more receptive, a framework's being created, but they're obviously also welcoming you to directly engage and discuss, whereas previously from an industry lens, we would have said it was probably restricted and very much focused to traditional. So I think the only thing I can really add is that journey, I guess, that I've been on to, because the benefit that's come out the other end, that we've opened up new means of communicating with the regulators on new technology, and hopefully get that to market quicker. As Kendal said, there's a patient somewhere waiting for you to develop a new molecule for them. And then that's quicker, I think, is probably an indirect way of answering that one.
Yeah. I think definitely we've seen the COVID, the response that we had in such a short period of time. So things are possible, and obviously driven by a pandemic like that, it had to be fast. But nevertheless, the technology is there, the knowledge is there, the know-how is there, and regulators are really very welcoming. I think it's a very, very big change from the early 2000s to now. And although progress sometimes seems to be very slow, and QBD, the principles are not, it's many years, engineers used that many years ago. And but nevertheless, I think from my point of view, education is perhaps fundamental there, and the more we teach the younger generation to have those concepts in mind and apply those concepts, the easier we'll get. But hopefully that's our job, Bianca.
Thank you, Walkiria.
Is there any other questions?
We have one more question, but we have a commentary from Tamiris Pimenta. She is a student, I remember her. And she agreed with Kendal. It's difficult to make pharmaceutical going through the barriers from mathematics and do KBD with quality. So thank you, Tamiris, to contribute.
Yeah, I think most of the comments are very positive, and I can see some
question.
Comments. Okay, a question. Technology innovation in the Brazilian pharmaceutical industry, something that we have been doing, can be applied abroad. Can you give us some examples? But I'm sure, I mean, there are center of excellences in Brazil as well as everywhere in the world. But in Brazil, for sure, there are some pockets of excellence. And for sure, it is something that obviously can be applied. But you would have to give me an example there.
We have an example in our symposium. Anderson Albuquerque is showing a presentation about design space, and he's from Merck in Brazil. Abbott also has a center of excellence here in Rio de Janeiro. So Merck and Abbott, that I know, they have a good science that is being doing here in Brazil. So I think we all agree that Brazilian science is in development, and also we also can contribute with the technologies development in abroad.
Of course, I totally agree. And I think it is quite exciting to see this young generation, how much energy they have and how much kind of hungry they are to really get engaged and do well. And you can clearly see that. It's not only here, but also in India and in China. I can see exactly the same. We have students from all over the world, and you can see how engaged they are. But I think coming back to the skills, if I can just mention this before we close, we have a few minutes there. I think data management and analytics will become more and more important in the future. And for sure, those mathematical skills and students not being worried about getting engaged with coding, with learning how to code, learning how to do some of the multivariate analysis that is required, because the systems are more complex and you really need to move towards applying tools that perhaps a pharmacist is not used to it. But more and more, I think the curriculum has to change to accommodate those needs for the future. But it's not only that as well, with the multidisciplinary aspects of working with engineers, with chemical engineers and mathematicians, statisticians, and so on. So it's the ability to be able to work with people with different backgrounds. It will become more important in the future. But I will stop for now. And if any of you, the panelists, would like to thank you again, if you have a final message to say to our delegates, you're welcome. We still have a few minutes to spare.
I would like to make a question. It's specifically for Suelen Navarro, but I would like to have the contribution of Kendal, Pitt, and Sander. How far away from continuous manufacturing is Brazil? So I would like to see continuous manufacturing running drugs products in Brazil. How far away we are? I read. So Kendal, Pitt from GSK. It's a multinational company. It's good to hear his opinion. But for Suelen, please.
So yeah, nowadays we have some companies that work with continuous manufacturing abroad Brazil. And then they bring the API or the drug product to Brazil. We do not have a continuous manufacturing facility in Brazil. I had the opportunity to talk with some companies here in Brazil, and few of them are thinking of or starting the development of this approach, the continuous manufacturing, but is also in the beginning of the discussions or the development. Is something new for us here yet. So we are still beginning.
Yeah, I'd just like to say what I see is that a way to approach that is when you formulate, and we do this at GSK, and I know other companies do this, we formulate to target continuous processing at the start. And that makes you think about particle shape and size, excipients. If we're lucky, it will go continuous. If not, we can always switch it to batch. That's the thing. It's you don't want to block yourself at the start by not having the ability to go to continuous by your excipient selection and your processes. And I see that as something for you to think about. Yeah, and I see going on as well. Yes.
Kendal, Fernando Campa is asking about could we think about continuous manufacture for old molecules like the ones that we predominantly have in the region?
Well, actually, if you have an old molecule, it may well have a high volume associated with it. So actually, it would actually mean that it would be good to make it continuous, because you would have one line just making it continuously. So actually, it's a matter of looking around to see what are your high volume products. What would be it? Both the over-the-counter ones, for example, some of your pain relief products, or some more like your cardiovascular products are probably the ones, your beta blockers, your statins. They're the ones which I would think would probably lean themselves towards going continuous. And the benefit would be, again, the cost and advantage of getting them out to the patient.
Mm.
So I think we can ending our discussion. I promise to Sander have a pretty punctuality. She left when I said that. He left, but we say here in Brazil like British punctuality, so we try to.
Yeah, I did find that was very funny. I thought the Germans were very punctual.
Okay.
So I would like to thank you all for this, to spend your time to contributing in Brazil for develop knowledge about continuous manufacturing, quality by design. Thank you all. Thank you for all speakers of our symposium and also for our attendees. Hopefully it will be very it is an inspiration for you all. And thank you again. Walkiria, would you like to say something else?
No, thank you, Bianca. I think this is the beginning of a long journey for you, and I think well done. You've put all these people together, and I think it can only get better. and just keep doing what you're doing, and well done again. So I think it's 3 o'clock on the dot now, and
yes, so you can. I will share a question from Tamiris about a course of KBD, but I will let Sander free to get out and go to our meeting. Thank you, Sander. Thank you, Kendal. Thank you, Suelen.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Okay. See you guys. Thank you very much for everything. Thank you. Bye.
Walkiria, Tamiris asked about a course, KBD.
Okay. Well, but there are so many short courses available around the world, but we do have a full-time MSc course on quality by design, and we also run some distance learning courses on quality by design. But it depends very much what you want. If it is short courses, there are quite a few short courses around. But university, I think, only dedicated course on quality by design specifically. I only know my course, so I can strongly recommend that. Bom, agora os ingleses já saíram.
Já saíram, acho que a gente pode falar em português, né?
Se tiver alguém mais aí para perguntar, não tem problema, posso continuar um pouquinho.
Aproveitem, a Suelen está nos seus últimos minutos aqui com a gente.
Sim.
Se alguém tiver mais uma pergunta, ela está se colocando à disposição. Podem fazer as perguntas em português aqui no comentário, né? No chat, a gente vai direcionar, eu coloco aqui na tela.
Se eu puder ajudar em algo mais, posso ficar aqui mais uns minutinhos. A gente aqui no Brasil não tem tanto problema com a pontualidade britânica.
Realmente.
Eu tenho um meeting às 3h30, mas até lá eu posso ficar, não tem problema.
Acho que a gente não recebeu mais perguntas, deixa eu só dar mais um tempinho.
Sim, uma observação que eu tenho é assim, ainda apesar desse, né, de eu trabalhar aqui há muitos anos com Quality by Design e trabalhar com companhias que já usam Quality by Design há muitos anos, mas os conceitos, isso é que o pessoal tem que incorporar como no dia a dia. Não tem all the way of developing products at the manufacture other than starting from beginning, which is with your QTPP, and going from there with all the methodology that you have to, que você tem que aplicar. Mas não existe um segredo, como é que a gente aplica QBD. É uma evolução de adquirir essas metodologias e começar a aplicar como se fosse no dia a dia, não tem nada de especial, e a ciência, como diz o Kendal, que é o fundamental, né? Então, mas
vou pegar o gancho. Posso pegar o gancho do que você disse, Walkiria, que a gente pode começar do simples, né? A gente na disciplina até de farmacotécnica, onde os alunos ainda não têm nem visão do processo industrial, a gente começa a trabalhar, eles às vezes criam uma certa resistência, porque eles começam mas KBD é muita coisa, você está falando de KBD. Não, vamos começar do pequeno, aplica só isso, a gente vai começar a visualizar, né? Começamos a visualizar. E adaptando, né, o nosso pensamento, a ciência, o risco, a saber fazer as perguntas corretas, né? A conseguir analisar o risco, ter visão maior, compreensão do processo. Então, eu acho que essa questão de começar pequeno, né?
Se eu puder contribuir, construir sobre os conceitos que vocês colocaram aqui, acho que essa fala da Bianca é muito importante. Mudar a forma de ver, mudar os pensamentos, né? Porque hoje, alguém perguntou quais os entraves para a gente introduzir isso no Brasil, não lembro agora quem foi, né? Que a gente tem trazido os produtos de fora e registrado aqui produtos de fora, né?
Sim.
Mas essa mudança de pensamento, acho que é a chave inicial, né? Claro, tem toda a questão científica, a gente precisa construir o conhecimento, precisamos ter mais experts no Brasil, que nós ainda não temos, né? Principalmente nessa parte de matemática, até mesmo no processo de produção contínua, que tem todas as suas particularidades. Mas essa mudança de mindset, essa mudança de pensamento, acho que é muito importante. Hoje o que a gente vê assim ainda são muitas empresas, não todas, né? Mas muitas empresas focadas ainda no controle de qualidade, principalmente, né? E assim, para produção contínua é preciso desde o desenvolvimento, você tem que ter outra visão. E o Quality by Design se aplica muito bem, casa muito bem com a produção contínua. Então, é mesmo uma mudança de ponto de vista, uma mudança de pensamento sobre como desenvolver, como controlar o processo, como garantir a qualidade do produto ao fim do processo. Então, é uma mudança de mentalidade mesmo.
E não necessariamente precisa ser para um produto novo, né? Já precisa, a gente vai encontrando problemas na produção e a resolução desses problemas, se forem com esse novo mindset aí, a busca com certeza pela solução do problema vai ser muito mais efetiva e vai construir um conhecimento grande para gerar mudanças ali, e a flexibilidade regulatória que a gente está começando a observar gera muita responsabilidade, mas ao mesmo tempo permite que o processo não seja tão engessado e permita que novas adaptações para a melhoria do processo. A Anvisa com certeza não vai negar um incremento ali, uma alteração naquele processo que gere um benefício na qualidade.
Com certeza, com certeza. O importante nesse caso, né, a gente está assim, falei bastante de flexibilização de normas, a gente como reguladores, nós também estamos nesse processo de mudar o ponto de vista, de mudar o racional, né? Então, o importante é que a empresa demonstre para a gente, com dados, com racional técnico e científico, de que aquela proposta de novidade, aquele algo novo que está sendo proposto, mesmo que não tenha um histórico de ter sido usado anteriormente, ele vai garantir a qualidade do produto, vai conseguir fazer com que aquele produto continue sendo produzido dentro das normas de boas práticas, de acordo com os requisitos de boas práticas, e que seja entregue para o paciente um produto com qualidade, segurança e eficácia. Então, no caso de produção contínua, né, é preciso demonstrar que a estratégia de controle garante com que haja um estado de controle, que o processo permaneça saudável, né? A saúde do processo, a gente fala muito em produção contínua. Então, é preciso demonstrar isso e ser transparente, responder as perguntas. Às vezes, algumas empresas não gostam muito de falar, né, detalhes, mas a gente precisa desses detalhes. Precisa ter acesso a essas informações, a gente precisa da discussão, às vezes fazer uma visita, não é nem inspeção que eu estou falando, já aconteceu da gente precisar fazer a visita na fábrica para compreender de fato como que é aquele processo, né? Então, a gente está aberto ao diálogo, mas também a empresa tem que nos disponibilizar as informações para que nós, como reguladores, possamos ter certeza e assim uma consciência de que sim, esse produto, dessa forma como está sendo proposto, tem a sua garantia de qualidade, segurança e eficácia, né?
Sim, com certeza. E, Suelen, eu tive uma experiência muito boa aqui com o MHRA, dando suporte para nossos cursos, né? E isso seria uma coisa interessante de vocês discutirem entre vocês, Bianca, porque a gente tem que ensinar os alunos, né? E mudar esse mindset, começa lá de baixo, né?
A gente começou com esse evento, né? E isso é para começar a caminhar aí com esse processo. Eu já fazia isso pequeno dentro da universidade, né? Pequeno que eu digo, os meus estudantes, então ampliar isso para fora da universidade, por isso é um projeto de extensão, né? Então a gente está querendo levar isso para fora para estudantes de outras universidades, e não só estudantes, né? Mas profissionais que já estão atuando, já estão formados, mas não necessariamente foram formados com esse mindset aí. Então, a fala da Suelen traz muito insight para estudantes de graduação e pós-graduação das oportunidades que vai ter aí por vir com essas transformações da Anvisa em diversas áreas, né? Aqui a gente está focando no âmbito de desenvolvimento farmacêutico, de produção, né? De desenvolvimento de produto e produção, mas para diversas áreas está ocorrendo. E então vale bastante a pena essa observação e essa inspiração. Eu vou colocar a pergunta da Alessandra, que ela é da Fiocurso, né, que trabalha com a parte de 3D print. Se a Suelen puder responder.
Tá. Na minha apresentação, lá no fim, eu pus o link de contato, né, de como entrar em contato com a gente. Então, Por exemplo, se a empresa quer uma reunião, ela perguntou depois em outra pergunta se é parlatório. Sim, a reunião é via sistema parlatório. Se você quer discutir, ter orientações sobre uma tecnologia emergente, antes de fazer um protocolo na ANVISA, por exemplo, de pedido de registro ou de pedido de certificação de pós-prática de fabricação, a ANVISA está aberta assim esse diálogo. Você pode ir lá no link que eu coloquei de canal de atendimento, requisitar uma reunião, reunião via parlatório, via sistema parlatório. Aí, assim, o que eu deixo muito claro é coloquem em poucas palavras o que vocês almejam com essa reunião, qual que é o objetivo dessa reunião. Porque um time vai avaliar o que vocês estão propondo e aí decidir se vai de fato haver uma reunião ou se é uma resposta escrita. Então, esse é um sistema que vocês podem usar, que é via parlatório. Agora, se vocês querem tirar uma dúvida pontual, não há necessidade de uma reunião propriamente dito, quero tirar uma dúvida pontual, é possível fazer isso, tanto pelo ANVISA Atende quanto pela ouvidoria. Então, vocês podem criar um protocolo, preencher lá o formulário, colocar a dúvida, esclareçam bem, assim, tentem não colocar termos muito gerais, especifiquem bem o que vocês querem sanar de dúvidas e a equipe responde por escrito as dúvidas. Hoje a gente está com um procedimento de tentar direcionar as dúvidas para os times de expert relacionado com o assunto. Então, tem, por exemplo, um time de tópicos e transdérmicos que eu faço parte, muitas vezes a gente tenta direcionar questionamentos para esse time. Então, tem o time de produção contínua, tenta direcionar para esse time, o time de estabilidade, assim vai indo para que a gente possa sanar da melhor forma possível essas dúvidas e atendê-los da melhor forma possível.
Pessoal, preencham a pesquisa de satisfação que está na plataforma. Eu também coloquei um link aqui para a pesquisa aqui da Mesa Redonda, né? Para a gente saber o que vocês acharam dessa interação. E na plataforma tem a pesquisa do evento geral. Aproveitem para deixar comentários, né? O Gianni comentou aqui como faço para ter outros cursos. Deixem comentários da demanda de vocês, né? Do que vocês estão buscando, porque a gente realmente quer fazer a diferença no desenvolvimento acadêmico e profissional, né, de vocês, e quer trazer conhecimento dentro do que vocês estão buscando. Então, não deixem de preencher a pesquisa de satisfação e fazer comentários a respeito do que vocês estão buscando, que a gente pode atender realmente. E acho que agora a gente pode encerrar, né? Agradecer mais uma vez a presença da Suelen e agradecer muito a presença da Walkiria e da contribuição dela no evento, né? Suelen, foi um prazer conhecer você e espero que a gente ainda possa aí, né, continuar com essa interação e conseguir gerar alguma mudança aí, que a universidade possa contribuir com a mudança que a ANVISA precisa, né, do cenário farmacêutico no Brasil, e essa troca é muito importante. Obrigada também a todos os participantes, né, que estiveram aí com a gente. Eles vão ter essa gravação depois disponibilizada na plataforma, então eles poderão rever, né? Muitos dos attendees, dos participantes não puderam estar presentes. A ideia desse evento é ser on demand, é ter as palestras gravadas para que possam, né, consultar esse material quantas vezes for necessário. Então, hoje estamos encerrando o evento. Obrigada a todos.
Bom final de semana a todos.
Né? Um bom final de semana.
Obrigada. Até a próxima oportunidade.
Tá bom. Obrigada, gente. Tchau.
Tchau.
Abraço. Tchau.
Até mais.
Tchau.